here. Great. So welcome, everybody. Thanks again for being here with Lindsay and I. We're really excited for this conversation. So cool to see folks dialing in from all over the world. Really honored by your attention and presence here. And we cooked up some cool topics for this discussion about each of our respective paths to making 100K in revenue totally on our own as coaches and facilitators. And yeah, I think we're just going to jump in, kind of talking about some of the really important elements that we had in common in our story and some of the things that were different for each of us kind of as we go along. And as we go, really want to encourage you guys to write down questions or reflections either in the chat or on your own. And so we can bring those to the end of the conversation for a rich dialogue, just exploring these topics a little bit deeper in the areas you guys want to hear more. But Lindsay, do you want to kick us off?
Great. Okay, so I'll start with, I think a good place to start. Do you agree, Gabe, of just kind of sharing our stories of what got us here today?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's fun that we all had a little vignette into each other's stories with the check in there about where we're calling from. And I like how folks give a lot of that background too, right? Like in Susan's case, like there's a whole lot of story in each of our lives. And that's really what I think can be the most powerful and compelling element of creating a brand as a coach is I've found that time and again that people care more about your story and whether they can personally relate to what you've been through rather than your qualifications or your training or even your work experience. So like I got hired as an executive leadership coach without ever having led a team. I've never had a director role or anything. Now I'm coaching people who have 40 direct reports. And that's because of the experience and the story that I told, not because of the qualifications and experience I had. And I don't think that that's something, I hear that a lot with new coaches, and Lindsay, you probably speak to this as well, that they're like, oh, well, what trainings do I need? What certification do I have? Like, I haven't done that. I can't do that. And that just hasn't been true in my experience. I think people want to feel a part of themselves in your story. They want to relate to you. They want to know, what has Lindsay done that I could believe myself doing? And I use the metaphor almost of like, if you're trying to follow somebody through the forest in a snowstorm, you wouldn't want to follow somebody who's 5 miles ahead of you because their tracks would already be filled in. You actually want to be following somebody who's pretty close to where you are on the journey so that those tracks are fresh, because their experience is going to be more relevant to where you are. And so even if you are like new at this, there's somebody who can benefit from the experience that you had because it's fresh and relevant to what they're going through. Instead of like, oh yeah, I've already made $5 million and sold 5 companies. It's like, you have a gap between maybe some people that could learn from you and where you are. So really just leaning into that experience that you have, that life story, is what's valuable. And how you tell it in a way that's compelling and gets people imagining themselves in your story, that they can relate to it and say, I can resonate with that experience, or I could imagine myself in that position.
Yeah. To build on that, and that I can hop in and tell my story out a little bit for you guys, but I actually, because I think Gabe, it came up in our conversation, and then another conversation with a fellow coach around the book, The Prosperous Coach. Did you tell me about that? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think I did.
And I've been reading that recently for the first time. Has anyone read that book? Yeah, okay, I'm like late to the game. Anyways, it's like a gift coming to me right now in the phase and stage I'm in my career. It has been incredibly regrounding, because I don't know about you guys, and we can talk about this more later as we get into things, but like, it becomes really overwhelming when like every day in LinkedIn, you're being bombarded by people saying like, oh, double, triple your leads. You get 100, this much revenue a month. Or if you follow other coaches or folks in the industry that are like, have all of their world and everything on social media, it can be really overwhelming to thinking of comparatively and like what I'm not doing. And anyways, I have found that like a really beautiful gift, because it just regrounded me in exactly what you're saying, Gabe, of like how it's all about just connecting in the relationship, and like how are you building relationships and just giving an incredible transformative experience. It just brought me back to the roots of the power of coaching. And I had a new client introductory call the other day, and they specifically asked, and we're like, so I want to hear more about your story. And I shared with her, we had so much in common. And at the end of it, she's like, I'm really feeling this. I feel like we're cut from the same cloth. And I was feeling the same way. So it was like just such a mutual connection of like, I would be so honored to work with you, and her feeling like, yeah, I'm feeling the connection to your story, to who you are. And that I wasn't even selling anything. We didn't even talk about anything, related to the program, just coaching and her story. So
Yeah.
it's really powerful.
That's a great
Yeah.
example of how it works in like an actual conversation, that it's a relational conversation about understanding somebody and like also being revealed, right? I think in some coach trainings you talk about like self-management and holding back and really making it about the client. But I think when you're starting a conversation with somebody in a working relationship, they are deeply curious about you. And the safer you feel being revealed to them builds trust right out of the gate. And to your point about social media, like I've been terrible at it. I also feel that FOMO of like, man, I'd have so many more clients if I could just get my Instagram up to 10K. And if I posted about, I don't do it at all. I really am like have a big gap in my business with social media. And I'm still able to have a full and successful practice without it because my approach is relational and it's community based. And so I think about where is the next perfect person for me to have a conversation with, right? Not how do I reach 10,000 people? I want to reach one or two people with like a really powerful and personal message that they resonate with and they feel compelled to give me an hour of their time just getting to know whether or not I could support them. That's a powerful ask. And so the power of that ask is diluted if you're just carpet bombing the internet with hashtags, right? But if you're speaking to somebody at a really personal level in a way that resonates with them, that invitation is much more compelling. And I've talked to some coaches who have built their business using things like Instagram, and they end up filtering through a lot of like low quality leads, people who aren't engaged, who aren't ready to buy, who just want to take up your time and ask a bunch of questions. And they're in their DMs all day, just responding to strangers and not getting traction. And so I think there's there's a way to do it that makes it successful. Somebody else could teach you that because I have no idea how it works. But I find that the best way to do it is to find communities where you can really serve and start a one-on-one conversation. And also like hire a copywriter to tell your story. That was one of the best investments I made in my business. I like wrote my story. I hired somebody to make it really polished and read well. And then I put it on my website. And I have a ton of people who reach out to me and like, I read that story and it really resonated with me. And I wanted to talk to you, right? Instead of that broader approach. It's not as scalable. I think it requires a little bit more um, energy to have those one-on-one conversations, but ultimately I found the payoff to be greater and more enjoyable because I like having those one-on-one conversations. I like getting to know people. I imagine that's true of you as well, Lindsay. It's just interesting to get on the phone and have that intimacy there instead of this
Yeah.
more anonymous conversation with the internet at large.
Yeah, and it's actually a great segue into a bit of my story and background of what got me to where I am right now. And it's because so much I can think about the success I've had in the last year. So I'll just like start. So from the beginning. So I'm from Chicago, but I come from advertising. I worked in advertising and agency world since I graduated from college. And so over a decade and and I was climbing that ladder pretty quickly and in account management, client services, but something was always nagging at me that like it wasn't right. Like I knew I wasn't reaching potential. Like I could do it. I was good at it, but I was kind of partly always miserable and just like something just didn't click. And I even went to London and lived in London and worked there because that was really important to me. So I just want to connect with people from everywhere. And I realized when I was in the London office, what really was important to me, because when they working there, all they cared about was like revenue and financials. And I had to tap into a whole different part of me to like feel valued by them. Whereas where I came from and realized what I really valued was the people and the team building and shifting culture and nurturing talent. And so when I went back to Chicago, I started to lean into that. And I go, I got to get off of this track. I don't know what track to get onto, but I can see what the next 10 years look like, and I can see what I'm going to be at the end of it, and that's not okay. So I ended up naming to a friend and mentor, close mentor of mine who'd done coaching and was like, I think I maybe coaching. What is that? Started doing coach training through CTI, of course, and fell in love. And the coaching helped me determine what was right for me, which coaching, and learned so much about myself. And then I started certification right at the start of the pandemic. Actually, April 2020 was when I started with certification program and had to launch my company to get paying clients for it. And a real gift to that process was I connected with some people I was working with on my client at the time at the agency. And one of them was, her name was literally, her title was Chief Connection Officer at a PR agency. And she was a connector. And when I told her I needed clients, she's like, send me an email, like, tell me, what is it I'll send it to all my friends, like, help you out. And I sent it to her about coaching, whatever. And she's like, oh, actually, can I hire you? I think I have something to talk about with you. Like, yeah. So I ended up supporting them through a career transition. And then they brought in a lot of referrals, started getting some other folks, some other traction, and started feeling more and more miserable at the advertising side of my life and more fulfilled by coaching naturally. And so about start of 2021, I realized I need to get out. I had a pretty bad burnout at one point, took a lot of time to reflect, and found so much understanding and learning about myself and where I wanted to be going around coaching. And so I decided to go for it. I ended up going part-time agency for about 9 months, like April 2021 to the end of the year. Have a part coaching, part still working advertising to help the transition, which is really great. And then I went in full time in January. And what has helped me in terms of, I never thought I'd hit over 100K this year. I mean, I was hoping just to like double my revenue last year, and maybe I get like towards 70 to 80K or something. But what really helped me get there was, one, I kept getting referrals that were, because I kind of started with an executive as one of my first clients that was really successful. I've gotten more and more referrals, and most of my population now is more executives or just people within the industry that I come from. And through that, also, I worked with a business coach who really helped and pushed me to raise my rates, which I think is something that Gabe, I know you want to talk about a lot about. But so owning my rates and getting pushed by someone to raise them consistently was pretty big. And then earlier this year, I got approached by an old agency I was connected with and got asked to do some workshops and some facilitation. And that's what really unlocked a lot of revenue. And I know for you too, Gabe, like, it's such a rich territory, and I'd love to hear who else maybe is entering in that space. So it's very new, but it's been really lucrative, but also super fulfilling. I love it. I had my first in-person workshop last week at a law firm. I know nothing about lawyers. I knew nothing. And it was through one relationship of a friend. And this is what goes to all active relationships. So the relationship with one friend, I did some pro bono coaching with her in leadership, and it made really an impression. So she came to me and said, you want to do a training for our female lawyers as part of our initiative group, put something together for them, ended up selling in 2 trainings with the law firm. And after the in-person training, now they want me to come back and do it for the whole group. So it's like, even not understanding the industry, as you were speaking to, Gabe, just bringing them content that's actually around coaching skills made such an impression, and that has been bringing in a lot of momentum. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of the relationship around referrals from people who actually, best leads are referrals. If I get any leads from social or LinkedIn, they don't convert. They're not.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of gems you're dropping in here, Lindsay, and I just want to tease
Yeah,
some things out
please.
for the group that, starting with your story and sharing how you shifted towards passion and purpose, that translates to the relationships that you build, right? When you center that experience, like that you gave something up to do it, right? That's
Yeah.
what people want to feel from you, that you gave something powerful up to step into some deeper meaning for yourself. I think it's a really resonant part of your story. And it was similar for mine. I think that's why you and I resonated and wanted to have this. It's like, I called it spiritual inflammation, where I was having an allergic reaction to my daily life and I needed to change something. Also had a lucrative, successful career in tech sales and was like, burn it all to the ground to do coaching.
Yep.
And finding ways to serve people in ways you didn't anticipate, right? So we'll talk a little bit about business structure in a minute. But kind of what you said about thinking, oh, cool, there's one-on-one coaching here. How else could I apply this? Oh, you guys want training and workshops? Awesome. I can design something around that. That was 60% of my revenue last year, was training and workshops, not just one-on-one coaching. So how can you expand into the relationship and find different ways to serve with the same set of skills that you have? And it's driven by your passion and your curiosity and your desire to serve in this work, which is everything that I heard consistent throughout your story. And so that's, I think, has been the key to really unlocking these other streams of revenue, is getting creative with how we apply the training we have, and not just think, okay, cool, I can only do this in one-on-one. Like everything that you, like, I have an assumption a lot of people here went through the coactive process. Everything you learn in CTI could be made into a group workshop, right? You can put your own spin on it. You can have it meet the context of the client and really get them excited to solve a different set of problems than they thought they could when they initiated the relationship with you.
Yeah.
And that's an important piece I want to speak to before we move to kind of some of the business structure stuff, is really understanding that you're building like these ideas to meet their needs. That you're not just focusing on like, oh, I really want to coach this way. I really want to show up like this. Are you also asking what's relevant to the client? What's the challenge you want to solve? And I have an idea that Lindsay and I were more intuitive with this because of our professional background, like you in advertising and me in sales, like really listening for and designing to a solution to a problem that somebody actually has, right? So did you ask them what they're trying to solve for? Did you ask them what they wanted to get out of the process? And are you designing from your passion, or are you designing with your passion to their solutions? And that's the important step that you need to take, is really understand what's going to resonate for them. If they're having communication challenges, it's like frame everything about communication. If they're having retention challenges, talk about the ROI of like keeping people in high talent in the business, right? If your client's facing burnout or, has real confusion about what's next, talk about clarity and purpose, right? And alignment pieces of the work. Because the work touches so many parts of the human experience, it's really important to tap into that in the conversation.
I have a really good example of that actually, Gabe. So talking about facilitation and workshops, I've been asked by the agency to do workshops on how to be a coach like leader. That's like part of their goals. That's like their new requirement, is to train leadership to be more coach like. So they wanted a coach, someone from the industry to do it. So I started, never designed anything like that before, started to design it, went through it, great, was loving it. And then when talking to the law firm about what they wanted, realizing, I thought I would do something different. And then realizing what they needed was they wanted a workshop around connection, how just to get people reconnected. And when I found out what their issues were, where the resistance was, and it was like a lack of respect with one another and talking, disparity between like levels of associate to partner. And so then I realized it actually was a lot of the exact same stuff I've been building for coach-like leadership. But instead of being like, this is how you be a coach and here are foundational skills of coaching, it turned into, how do you fuel meaningful connection? And to fuel meaningful connection, it's your mindset and what you show up. So that it's the same stuff as coach, a lot of the same content, but getting to the same place, but just redirected for their need. And it was still equally powerful. So
Yeah,
you
it's
don't have to do that
translating.
every time.
Yep, to their context. And I have the same example from my world, or similar example, is this toolkit I use called Authentic Relating, which has been transformational to me in my personal life. I learned it at a workshop in Bali in a really like spiritual kind of hippy dippy context. But when I saw what they were doing, I was like, oh my God, this is incredibly transformational. Yeah, I bet the business world needs this. And I pitched a few of my clients who also are in like positions of leadership in their organization, and got one referral from a client who was a consultant. And like now we're doing it as a like leadership development series for a major institution that has 5,000 employees that are distributed across the country. That one contract has been 60% of my revenue, because they're booking this as a training series for their team. And I'm doing the most basic unit of the workshop that I did in Bali. It's just part of, it's meeting that business context and that business need, and talking about, this is about professional relationships, not personal relationships, right? How to give feedback, how to understand each other better, how to build resilience into conversations by paying attention to how you listen and communicate. And so you could take that as a weekend of couples therapy, or you could take it as a leadership development training. The content's not that different. It's just the intention and the direction and how you're framing it to the client really creates a different impact for them.
Absolutely.
So what do we got next? I think we've talked a little bit about expanding business kind of beyond the one-on-one. And I think is there anything else you'd want to add to that?
Well, I guess I'd love to know from the group, just like talking about workshops and like corporate partnerships, is that something that's interesting? Because I've had some experience. I'm happy to share more, but if not, we can keep moving. I think we
I
both
think
have more to that. One thing I will share if people are thinking about it is just, and Gabe, we talked about this, is leverage your network and I just talked about this with another coach friend, when understanding how to approach corporate contracts or and proposals. Something that was really useful for me was just talking to people who are in the industry, who have done a lot of it. So I knew general pricing ballpark.
Right.
Because it's insane, different budgets and different industries and different needs. So don't be afraid to ask, or even with my contact, I was a little more personal with them, but I was able to find out from them what's the budget to work with. So you're not underselling yourself
Yeah.
and not getting the most
Ask
out of it.
ask for that information first. I always do like informational interviews for people who have written proposals before or who work in corporate HR. Like find someone in your network who's a buyer or knows about the buying process and ask them about it. What's the typical like vendor relationship look like in your organization? How long do these contracts last? How do you vet them? What's your budget for training and development? What's the typical contract value for like one of these relationships? It's like you might have been thinking to charge $400 or $500 when they would have expect to pay $3,000 to $5,000. And if you don't come in there and match that price, they don't take you seriously. And I've actually heard stories of people who don't get gigs because they didn't charge enough, so that organization didn't take them seriously as a candidate for the role, especially when it comes to speaking and training stuff.
I had this exact experience where somebody said to me, add a zero to
Yep.
your proposal. And I was like, and I added a zero and they signed without even batting an eyelid. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. It's huge, or else you're leaving money on the table. And also, I don't know, this is like a very tactical thing, but as I've been new to this space, been using a lot of resources like Rocket Lawyer and things to put together my SOWs and my contracts. So like, I know I talked to somebody and they said they had hired a lawyer to like create this whole contract for them and a statement of work and stuff, and wasn't necessary. So that saved me a lot of time and money using resources like that when trying to come up with the right paperwork.
Yeah, and I was even
Guys-
lazier than that. I
Are you
just
guys
asked the
willing-
client what they use for other vendors. I was like, do you guys have a
Oh.
template for this? You know, I'm like, great. Yeah, they had one. So they just sent me that.
Oh, that's
I was
really
going to
good.
say, are you guys willing to share these kinds of like Rocket Lawyer, like these kind of resources with us?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sure.
For sure. I made a whole list of different ones that I use for different things that if it comes up, I'll share. But yeah, and for invoicing, I use FreshBooks to invoice my corporate clients, and that's worked really well.
Yep, I use PayPal. It works fine. And a lot of my corporate clients they don't want to pay me on my system. They want to pay me on theirs. So they just need the invoice for the record of the payment, referencing the scope of work, and then they'll actually pay me through their system. So it's not usually up to you to provide the infrastructure. They probably have it when you're working with a larger org. So don't think you need to make a bunch of extra work for yourself. Like I'm always trying to find what's that kind of fastest way to the solution. And sometimes it pays to ask. But I noticed Kelly and Phil came off mute. Do you guys want to ask a question?
No, I was just going to say, I find a lot that there's a lot of industries that they don't want your expertise in their industry. You know, I started off coaching lawyers sort of accidentally, and wound up coaching dentists and executives. And I had they don't want you to be an expert in their industry because you bring something new and fresh that they haven't been exposed to.
Yeah, that's a great point. And they're not there for you to tell them what to do. That's a consultant's role, not a coach. And you're touching on the topic I was hoping we'd wind up at organically, which is niche, right? Oh, the big scary word niche. Like this gets talked about all the time. And Phelan, I do want to come back to your question, but this just feels like a relevant transition here. I have a bit of a subversive view on this. Don't take this as gospel. This is just my opinion. I don't think you actually need a niche. I think you just need to have an understanding of how you want to serve. And what you're listening for is the types of problems and solutions you're really excited to get into the weeds with about somebody. I actually think of niche more as a psychographic profile than a demographic profile. So like when I hear people say their niche, it's like, oh, I coach, single moms with autistic teenagers who are into tennis. I'm like, how did you, you know what I mean? It's so specific. Whereas I think of it more as like, what is their mindset? What are their beliefs? What are their values? How do they see themselves in relationship to their world? So my niche, air quote here, because it's pretty broad. It's like, I help people in transition find greater purpose and meaning from their work. I help teams struggling to connect, deepen the value and impact of their conversations, right? So like that could be a tech company, a gold mining company, a higher education institution. It could be, someone going through a divorce. It could be somebody in a career transition. It could be somebody having a spiritual awakening, right? Like both of those niches touch a lot of different places in the human landscape. But what matters is how that person feels about their experience and what type of things I'd be really excited to explore with them. And so it's like, I don't know, the jury's still out for me on niche. It's like, do you need it? Yeah, you need to be specific, right? Broad is broke. You can't solve everybody's problems. You can't help everyone. And if you're trying to do everything, you're just going to dilute the power of what you're up to. But I don't think you need this like demographic focus that I see driving the conversation about niche in the coaching industry. Because it's less about the person and how like the surface level characteristics and more about the deeper level challenges and beliefs that they have. And can you meet them in that deeper place of emotional impact? That's where I think you can create that resonance and that personal touch, right? That Lindsay was saying, that person in your like intro call really resonated with you and said, I want to work with you because I feel seen by you. I feel got by you, right? I believe in some of the things that you do. And when there's that, I forget what that, you're cut from the same cloth, right? That's a psychographic characteristic, not a demographic one.
Mhm.
And so just want to name that as a powerful way to approach that problem.
Yeah, I think niche is so interesting. And I love your perspective on it, Gabe, of like not being so demographic and thinking a little bit beyond into who you're really trying to connect with, like who are they as a person, which is really what we're trying to work with them to figure out, right? But I do start in a bit of a niche, and like the niche of career world is how I am marketed, is how I introduce, and that is a lot of the entry point. But I'm also very quite honest with my clients of like, yeah, so maybe this is why we're talking today, and this is maybe the start of it. But going back to like, as we learned in CTI, like I'm here to coach the whole person. So you might be showing up here because it's something going on in your career that you want to shift, but it might lead to somewhere totally different. I'm coaching all of you and all that's included here, but very much the whole purpose is like, it's more around focusing and sharing my philosophy as a coach, more so than like checking the boxes. Do you fit the type of person I'm trying to coach?
Right. And a lot of times clients come to the process in some ways not really knowing what they need. They might think I've had people hire me to help them finish their dissertation and manage their schedule, and they end up like building a bus and moving into it and like driving across the country. It's like the process can unfold organically into a totally different direction. And so if you're really trying to like sell to this limited concept that they have of what's really important to them before they've done the work of self-discovery, right, you're missing maybe something bigger that you could serve them with.
Mhm. It's fair. I also noticed, like you talked a little bit about like the quality of leads coming from like social, and I noticed that a lot. Like the folks that often come to me that way are looking for a different type of career coach, the one who's going to redo the resume, the one that's like going to tell them what to apply for, what their next job should be. And then I end up telling them, this is what I actually see that you need and how I could support you, or I'm not what you're looking for, and being very transparent. And sometimes their eyes are open and they're ready for it, but a lot of times they're not ready for it. They're not in the right mindset. It isn't, or, they want more of that box checker. And so I just said, yeah.
Susan put it well in the chat. Sell them what they want, give them what they need.
Yeah.
And I do think it takes a minute to understand that, right? And build a little rapport around it. And oftentimes when I'm on a conversation with somebody, especially in an introductory call where they're considering working with me, I try to remain unattached to their decision to work with me or not, but I try to really coach them through their decision to do it. And I found pretty consistently that the reasons people say no to coaching are actually the reasons that they need to do it. And just helping them understand that at the moment of decision is such a powerful process for them. And it also actually does win you a lot of business. Or you say somebody's like, well, I can't spend that amount of money. And you'd be like, well, do you often have trouble like investing in yourself or prioritizing your financial resources for what serves you most? And they're like, yeah, I do that a lot. It's like, okay, cool. Is this a moment where you want to make a different choice? Right. Or I can't make time for that. It's like same question, right? Do you really value your own time, or are you constantly giving it away to others? Like, to ask them to take a closer look at the thing they say they want to change and the way that they're reinforcing that thing they want to be different right now in this moment of choice, and say, this is the first time you could actually have it different. And this is the beginning of a process where you get to make it different from here forward. And usually if you're able to frame that well for them in that moment of decision, they're just like, they kind of hate you a little bit. They're like, God damn it, Lindsay, you're right. But then they sign the check, they sign the contract because they do actually want that. And you're holding a door open for them to step into it, right? By just pointing that out, being like, hey, this isn't about me, coaching you. This is just letting you know you're doing the thing right now that you said you didn't want to do, right? So how do you want to engage with that? And that's a bit of that, meeting them in what they want, but kind of showing them what they need or what they could do differently in the process of really taking, their own needs seriously by taking the coaching process seriously.
Yeah. Beautiful examples there. I see your question, Fallon here. Do you want to tell us, Gabe, are you cool if we pause and go into it? And sure we hit it? Why don't you speak to us a little bit about your situation and your question, and we'll see us or anyone else here can give some insight.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, I just noticed when you were both sharing your stories that when you were moving from one-on-one into like working with business and doing workshops and stuff, you moved through that through executives. I don't know if that's entirely true, but I'm just wondering, as a younger coach, and this is kind of like a me-oriented question, so only answer it if it applies to other people here, but just curious what you'd recommend in terms of doing more workshops, and maybe building a specific like funnel into that that's not necessarily through executives.
I could speak to that a little.
Sure. Yeah, go for it. I'll build.
I'd love to hear your reflections as well, but I don't want to paint the picture that it was all executives. I think that's actually more true for Lindsay than for me. So I was introduced to some contacts in organizations that had influence but not decision-making authority, and just kind of had to work that relationship a little bit to understand what would make them look good to their boss, right? What could they present as an idea for how to spend some budget, right? So really talking about like, what's the relationship in the organization between the decision maker, the budget holder, and like your contact. You can come in at any point, even if it's somebody on the front line who's like a manager, and they're like, they have a really firsthand experience of the challenges in the organization, and say, that's your only point of contact. Be like, cool, I have something that could really work for your team. Let me like give you a sample session of it. And then you can go to your director of talent development or your VP of whatever, HR, and sell this for me internally. So it doesn't need to be that the highest level of the organization is where you start. And a lot of the workshops I've run have also been for like organizations without a large hierarchy, right? It's like sometimes they've been for intentional communities, or they've been for co-working spaces, right? Or they've been for community groups like personal development groups on Meetup, or just community spaces in my town where people like occasionally come together for little salons or something, right? Like these workshops can take any number of forms. And a lot of times they're what's called a loss leader, right? In a business sense. It's like, you might not make money on that workshop. You know what I mean? You might spend a few hours preparing it. Maybe you only charge $10 a person, or you make it free. And like you spend some time investing in sharing the work. It might not lead to a conversation right away, but sometimes it does. Some of my best clients have come through doing a public workshop that was basically free. And then somebody in the room happened to be like in procurement or sourcing for this large consulting firm that does industry expertise. And I'm actually running a workshop for them on Thursday. It's my 4th one that I've done. They're $2,000 a pop. And it's like, I just met that person at an event they came to. I charged them, I don't know, $5 to be there. It was like it was zero money in the moment, but it ended up building a relationship that was lucrative. So I don't want to create the impression it needs to be top down. It can be much more organic and relational than that.
And that's exactly what I think you said that so beautifully. It's like, how do you empower the folks that you're coaching with, where you see an opportunity, or they are saying like, oh my God, I wish everyone on my team got access to this, or yes, it seems like a big issue is that like no one listens to one another, or it's so disrespectful, and no one, and then you can take that to say, well, what would be different if you'd be able to bring this type of content to your team and empower them. And also you just never know.
Great.
And I talk about my workshops with my friends and people in network, and then it turns, like last night talking about it with our neighbors, turned into, oh yeah, I should think and get in touch with you. I'm curious. So you just never know who's listening and who might have a connection. So don't be afraid to also share your interests and do a little manifesting through sharing, because you never know who's listening and who will be ready to hear and jump on it.
Yeah, and not being embarrassed to talk about your work as a coach and what you're doing. And really, this comes back to Steve Chandler's work, The Prosperous Coach. It's like, somebody who knows somebody who will buy from you right now. You don't need to go meet strangers on the internet. Use those concentric circles to create impact. And it's like, there's really only 3 steps to this. It's like meeting people, telling them what you do, and making offers to help them. That's it. If you want to distill it to its simplest elements, it's about starting those conversations with people where there's already some level of social capital or trust you can leverage in the relationship. You don't have to start from scratch with a cold conversation. Start with an introduction from somebody who knows you or is willing to make that conversation happen for you, and you can take it forward from there. And I got my first 30 clients that way, of just doing the client game for CTI. For those who haven't gone through their certification, it's like they make you start conversations with people so you have a coach load to carry through certification process. I decided I wanted the coachees that I had in that process to pay for the cost of certification for me. And so I was like, cool, I'm going to be net zero by the end of this. I also wanted to have enough to cover any attrition in the program. So I set myself a goal of 12 client minimum for that process. I think I had 14, right? So like, but that was all just through conversations with my cousins, my former coworkers, my friends. It's like, and I didn't end up coaching very many of those, but they all introduced me to somebody that ended up hiring me. And so are you willing to be kind of like unabashed in your ask for intros? Because it really makes a big difference. So we have another question coming in from Mar. What are your thoughts on public info for dollar investment for one-on-one? And do you think that one is to move towards workshops or group engagement in order to have financially successful biz versus solely focusing on higher rate one-on-one work? Interesting question. I don't think there's a direct formula here. Like Lindsay and I don't have the only recipe for success. Both she and I have built businesses that have multiple streams of income. But if you have a network that would provide a lot of high value one-on-one clients and you just want to focus on that, I think that can be valid. And I think some coaches do that. I think the most successful coaches I know do have diverse income streams that feed into each other. I've heard it referred to as the three-legged stool. So it's like having at least 3 streams of income in your business. So if one falls away, you at least have something to stand on, and they're synergistic. So in the example of the workshops, it's like my one-on-one clients give me intros to run workshops, and the workshops introduce me to people who want to become one-on-one clients, right? So there's sort of a relationship there. My third stream is group programs and retreats, which we can talk a little bit about in a moment, that aren't inside of an organization, but you're actually running a public offering for a group program. And again, those also feed introductions to new organizations, and they feed people who want to come in and do one-on-one work. And the challenge with only having high ticket one-on-one, it would be like if you're a car dealership that only sold Lamborghinis. So it's like a lot of people will walk onto the lot and want to buy a car, but you only have one offering and it's really high ticket, really bespoke, really white glove. That's great. Some people are definitely going to want that. What are you going to do for the people who want a Kia or a used Toyota? Right? So like those people are still ready to buy from you. If you had a product offering to meet where they are, you'd be more successful, because those people would have something low cost, a low, easier point of entry than a high touch 6-month one-on-one. And then maybe at the end of driving the Kia around, they come back and return the leased Kia and they're like, I do want that Lambo. You know what I mean? They're ready for that deeper work and that bigger price point, which I've seen a lot in my group programs. I've run 3 or 4 of them at this point. They're typically between 5 and 10 weeks, 90-minute calls, some one-on-one exercises outside of those, focused on different themes, right? One's around business development for entrepreneurs. The other's just around purpose alignment and sort of understanding your values. And by the end of both of those processes, those people have had contact with you and your work and your coaching philosophy, to Lindsay's point, and they're more excited to say, I want more of that. They might have never said, I'll pay you $5,000 at the beginning of that process. They'll be like, I'll give you $400 right now. But at the end of that, they're just like, yeah, can I get more of this? This has been great. Yeah. So the answer is like, yes, you can do it with one-on-one, and it's sometimes easier to do it with a little more diversity in the revenue.
I agree wholeheartedly with all of that. A couple quick builds is like, one, I think the biggest thing, and I think we're all aware of this, is like around one-on-ones, if that's your priority and your passion and feels right, at least in the start, is like make sure to then own your rates. Do a rate that allow you then to build your business that way, and or work up towards it, like what you want to be. I was just talking with someone about how like what my goal is, where I want to be, and be like, I'm not feeling like I'm not charging that now. Like I'd love to like charge like 10K a client, right? I'm not there yet. I'm not going to charge that. I feel comfortable charging that, but I want to build my business to a place where one day that's what I'm looking at or more. So how do I continue to like keep that goal in mind, to be keeping the pressure on myself to like own my rates as my experience, and I become more specialized, not specialized, but like it's more exclusive when I'm taking one-to-one clients versus other work. Yeah. And same, we talked about that a little bit with like the workshops and facilitation and that work, like making sure you're owning your rates. But I think and the other thing is like, don't do what I found, at least, like what's coming to you, being open to like the opportunities, saying yes, maybe trying something new, but also spending your energy in what's giving you energy. Like if I hated building workshops and I hated facilitating them, it would feel miserable because it is a lot of work and it takes a lot of energy and it's a lot to build. But I don't feel that way. I've like had so much passion out of it, and standing in front of that room of 30 women last week, I never felt more alive. Like it was like, this is it. So leaning towards the things that are calling to you that feel really great and genuine to how you want to grow, I think is a great place to start. And I'm not at a 3-legged stool yet. I have the 2. I'm starting also to get corporate contracts for 1-to-1 through corporations, which has been a nice also add-on of getting 1-to-1s myself, 1-to-1 through corporations, which they often pay more. And then now the facilitation, but hoping to build that, hopefully that 3rd leg next year.
Yeah, and I want to reflect on a few things that you said. I said, Michael, you're off mute, and want to get to you as well. But the idea of, yeah, really owning the value of the process and being able to get to a point where you feel comfortable charging more, I think has as much to do with your skill as it does with your confidence. And you gain that confidence through exposure. You gain that confidence through really having consistent results that you're getting for people. And maybe that means you need to charge less to have a higher volume at first. But I actually keep 2 documents. I have one of everybody who said no to me when I've pitched them a coaching offer and why they said no or how that process unfolded. And I have another one of everybody's lives who I've changed through my coaching work. And I asked them to write me testimonials, and I'll read both of them. And I'll lean into the one that says all the ways I've changed somebody's life. So that way, next time somebody says no to me, I can feel the confidence of pushing a little harder for that ask, because I'm confident in my ability to do transformational work with people. And so I'm confident asking a higher rate for that service. And it also brings people in who are at a higher level of commitment to the results that they want to get. So people value what they pay for. And I do think there's an equity conversation here in making coaching accessible, and that you don't want to just only work with people who can pay you 10 grand a pop, right? It's like, you're going to be really pricing it out of a lot of people's range if you do that. But you can't be of service to anybody if you can't pay your bills. And so I see this will come up a lot with coaches where they're like, feel some kind of way about money. And it's like, if you're not out in the world thriving and successful, you are depriving the world of your gifts. Full stop. There's no argument about it. And so if you want to create that for yourself, you need to be comfortable having some people paying the bills. And then you can create space for the pro bono, instead of saying, I'm only going to do pro bono and like, maybe I'll get to high price one day. You'll never get there, because most coaches, I think it's like 75% of coaches don't make it past year 3 in their business, because they just run out of steam. They run out of money. They take that lucrative offer to go back to what they were doing before. And so if you can't find a way to get across that 1 to 0, those people will never get that. The world will never get your talents and your gifts. And so offering some kind of tiered pricing structure, I have 2 spaces in my practice available to people who, like, I really want to offer them something where I know it's going to change their life at a price that's like going to stretch them, but not break the bank for them. I don't want somebody to feel like they're going to resent me for the billing cycle, but I do want people to feel like, oh my gosh, I have enough skin in the game here that I'm really risking a lot if I'm not getting what I need out of this. So, and I work with them on that. I'm like, here's what I usually charge. I want to collaborate with you on something that's going to stretch you, but not break you. And creating space for that in your practice, while still knowing, like, I have a minimum number of clients I'll offer that to, or I'm sorry, a maximum and a minimum number of people that I need to work with at this rate to really pay the bills.
Yeah. And I love the way you structure yours, Gabe, so maybe even more detail going into it to answer Susan's questions around specifics when it comes to rate. I think we talked about this, like, we want transparency on this call, especially around rates, because I feel like the more you understand how people are charging, what they're charging, how they've increased or structure the business, I think is huge. So I can start, and then Gabe, do you want to build on your story and how you kind of?
Yeah, before we do that, I just want to check in with Michael, because he's been waiting
Oh
patiently.
yeah, Michael. Yeah, you had a question as well.
Thank you so much for this wisdom, guys. Yeah, one, just was hoping to get a quick summary of the different income streams each of you have in the realm of coaching. And 2, I haven't heard either of you mention, like, I do in person, I do things online, I do a hybrid of both. And that's obviously like a big touch point for me and a lot of coaches. And so I'm just curious how you curate spaces depending on that.
Great. So I think we can answer the first part of that question in our discussion of rates. So maybe we can quickly answer the second part to get to the rates conversation instead of having to double back. And I can speak to my piece, and then Lindsay, I'm sure yours is different. 90% of my stuff is online, more. I think I only have one client out of like almost 20 clients I'm coaching right now that I meet with in person for one-on-one. For groups and workshops, it's different. It's probably 50-50. So, I try to run as many digital ones as I can because they're more scalable, but you get more impact from the one-on-one, especially if you're doing it to build relationships that will lead to one-on-ones. So like those low-cost public offerings, those are great to offer in person because then you get to chill with people afterwards. They come up to you, they have a conversation, they get to feel your energy and your presence. It's a little bit harder to convert from the digital workshops unless you have a community where you're offering them consistently on like an online platform. And it's the same with the virtual for corporate. It's like most businesses don't want to pay the extra expense of having an on-site facilitator and the time walking to and from the breakout. A lot of people have hybrid workforces too. So most organizations are like, want the digital training, but you can charge more for the in-person and some want that too.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about your rate stuff too, or do you want me to,
Do you have anything to add to the in-person versus online discussion?
So I majority out almost all my, actually like all my one-to-one clients are all virtual, mainly because I started during the pandemic. So everything started as virtual, and I have clients from all over. I coach folks in Australia, and then a lot of my clients are local to Chicago. Now I've moved. So my goal though, I coached in person on Friday, and oh my gosh, it felt so good. I loved it. So my goal, hopefully, I'd love to build up more in-person opportunities in San Francisco, but reality of time and trying to maximize schedules. I structure my business that I only coach certain days of the week. So I have certain days dedicated to business building time and also just flexibility for my life. So I only take clients Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and other days are whatever, my own time. So in order to do that, it's maybe not feasible to constantly do in person, but that's a goal. To build that. And then virtual, I just said I only had my first in-person last week, and that was such a gift. And so I'm going to push as much as possible to do more in person because it feeds me more. I think it fills my bucket, as well as I agree with you, Gabe, the impact is a lot bigger, but more significant. But majority of the workshops I'm being asked to do are virtual because of the nature of the businesses, of having different offices that they're trying to cater to in different companies. So.
Yeah, that staff might be spread out. And I think if I had to choose, I'd want to do my one-on-ones virtual and my facilitation in person when I could, because it's more rich and meaningful. And you touched on something structural that I want to mention before we move to pricing, which is working in versus on the business, which is a really important distinction, I think, especially for folks who are just kind of thinking through, like, how do I start? How do I make this work? You do need to plan time to work on the business, which is the building, the expansion, the outreach, the content creation, the strategy. And then you need to schedule time that's in the business, which is delivering service, right? Serving clients, actually like doing the thing. And I structure my time similar to Lindsay's. I really only see clients Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Occasionally I'll add some Mondays, but Friday and Monday are my on the business time, or like go ride my mountain bike time. You know what I mean? Like if I want to, if I don't have anything urgent, I won't schedule it. Because I've reached a point where there's some momentum. But I think it's important to time block and structure your weeks that way to really make sure that you have some balance of that. Because if you're working all on the business, no in the business, or all in the business, no on the business, things can get a little out of whack.
Yeah, good build on that. And is that when I was determining that, I actually was working with, a business coach who helped me structure my business, which is really helpful. And it started from a place of where do you structure your business now to fit the life you want in 10 years. Don't feel like you have to structure your business now to hopefully work to that. So it's like, I didn't want to work on Fridays. I wanted to have Fridays, Mondays flexible so I could travel more. I wanted to be able to travel throughout the year. Mornings, I'm really energized and focused. So actually mornings are a great time for me to do business building. So sometimes I block my mornings on certain days so I can do more business focus or personal time versus afternoons. Coaching, actually get energy from it. So it helps to coach for me in the afternoon. So I'm structuring the business around yourself, your needs, like what you want. Like you want a lazy morning where you can drink your coffee and read your book and walk your dog or take care of the kids stuff. Exercise, like that's me. So it's like, I don't usually schedule early clients often. And it changes depending on certain clients, but it's like starting around to set yourself up for success first. And then also that help set the rate. So it's like, if you only can take a certain amount of clients, certain days, then what does your rate need to be able to hit your goal and get close to your goal,
Yeah.
to be able to support that and working towards your revenue goals.
You got to do the math, right? You back it out. It's like, what's my cost of living? What's the amount I want for ideal savings? What's all that? Like, you really need to price it based on what you need, right? Coming back to where I started with CTI, I was like, I need 25 grand to pay for this coaching program. So that's how much I need to make sure I charge my clients through this process, right?
Yep.
It's like basing it on what you want to get out of it. And so I can talk about my pricing structure. With my one-on-ones, I have 2 tiers. I have 5K for 6 months, which is like my VIP offering, which gets you sort of like unlimited access to me via voice notes. It also gets a video library of like 20 videos that I created for one of my group coaching programs about business building and entrepreneurship and like, you know, all these strategy, like the different software that you use, like how to plan your week, all that stuff. And I offer people that's 5K upfront or $850 a month, right? So you get a little bit, you pay a little bit more if you pay monthly, but you could pay it all upfront and save a little bit of money. Or you have a 4K tier that's like you don't get as much of the one-on-one high touch support. You could still drop a voice note to me every now and again. You don't get the video library, right? So like there's some stuff that's not present for that package. And both of those, I have $500 additional in the first month for the discovery call, because I really like to go deep with that. I have a 2-hour conversation with people. I give them like a 14-page questionnaire, right? I really try to understand as much as possible upfront about them and how they want to work with me. And then I have a couple of these flex packages where it's like, let's co-design it. You know what I mean? Like, let's think about what's really going to meet you and serve you. It's like, if $400 a month would have you biting your fingernails off every time you go to pay me, like, okay, cool. Like, let's work with that, right? Because you still have skin in the game. And like, I have enough clients serving me at a higher level that like, or I'm serving them at a higher level that I can afford to take 1 or 2 of those on. So I offer those tiers for people. And it's gone through some changes over the years. I actually started off charging a lot more, and then I reduced my price a lot because I sort of had to eat some humble pie and be like, oh, there's a lot I don't know about this. And like, I was intuitively good at it, but as I learned all the things I didn't know, I lost my confidence to charge a higher rate. But then I sandbagged myself for like a year and a half where I was like already a PCC, already 500 hours experience, and I wasn't charging that much. And people like, and then my practice was filling up. I had like, I don't want to be coaching 19 people. 25 people. I want to be coaching like 10 to 12 at a higher rate. And so I had to readjust. I had to say no to some people who wanted to work with me at a lower rate. I had to turn down some opportunities. And ultimately, like if you're not saying no, then you're not creating the space that's needed for the yes. And it's about being able to hold out and wait for that. And for workshops, I'm undercharging. But I think the most organizations for like a team building or a leadership development exercise or training, virtual training, they'll pay at least $1,000. I'm charging right now $2,000 for 90-minute workshops. They wanted to up it to 2 hours, so I just increased it to 3,000. But I've heard people doing as high as like 10K for that, depending on the people in the room, the pay grade that they're at, and the number of people you can serve with that process and how well it threads into what they're doing. So I've actually had experiences with clients where like I'm giving the kickoff or the keynote for a weekend long training that's going to set the stage for the work they do together. That's a higher ticket item, right? Than something that's just sort of, you know, part of an ongoing training for them. But and then for the group stuff, it really varies. What's the size of the program? How many people are in it? What's the cadence? Is it 10 weeks? Is it 5 weeks? Do they get worksheets? Are they going to meet in person? Does it end in some kind of capstone retreat? Right. So that's all over the map, anything from $500 up to $3,000. The one I'm doing in Guatemala in 2 weeks, I'm going to go facilitate a 10-day in person. And it's like, it's a steal at $2,700 per person because it's also a residential program for 10 days of room and board on this beautiful, like 7-acre riverside property in Guatemala. So like, that's dumb cheap. And we're going to charge more next time we do it. But this is kind of like the pilot, which is also a good way to think about pricing your programs. It's like, if you just want to get the contract signed and try to test it out and build the idea, offer it at a slightly lower rate, but say, hey, I'm going to offer this as a pilot this round. So we'll come in at a lower price point. When we get the kinks worked out and we get some feedback from the team and we demonstrate the value, when we renew this, we're going to have a renegotiation of the rate, right? So make sure that you're saying that to anybody that you're offering a lower price to for, especially for workshops and trainings. If you want to get the conversation started at a lower rate, cool, whatever. But come back to that having prepared them for a renegotiation discussion.
And so the way my pricing is structured, I'm at 6 months with 12 sessions, meeting twice bi-weekly. I know someone asked about like bi-weekly, reverse weekly. I do bi-weekly, but actually a couple of things to build on that. I had one friend who's a coach, and she said that she went to weekly because she realized it would serve her clients and like her philosophy, what they're working towards more, and loves it. But she has shorter packages, meeting weekly. Fascinating. And then I had one client that actually designed kind of a bespoke, same pricing of 12, 6 months, 5K, but actually what he wanted to do, what we designed together, is we shifted some of the timing, where sometimes we only go 1 week, sometimes we do go 2 weeks. So it was actually the timing that he wanted to bespoke. It wasn't anything about the pricing. And then I do, depending on the person, sometimes we'll do a 4-month or a 5-month, but my rate will go up a little bit. So 5-month at 4,300 and 4-month at around like 3,800 or so. But I love Gabe's structure so much of like the premium VIP, and not that I might end up trying to see how I design around something like that too, because I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah,
and then, oh, go ahead.
Quick asterisk on that, longer engagements are better, I think, in general. Sorry.
I agree. I totally agree. And I don't offer it to everyone. I don't say, here are my options. It's with certain people with specific goals that I feel comfortable. And I will always tell them why I think 6 months is the best and why longer is better. And sometimes they'll say, will you do 3 months? Will you do 4 months? And I say, no, I won't, because of these reasons. And they end up respecting me more and then signing on for the 5 if I offer it, or to the 6 months. So I completely agree with you. That's only for very specific goals and people that I will feel comfortable doing that. And then I do, if they pay in full upfront, then I'll give a time bonus. So the first session, I'll add 20 extra minutes to the first session that we have together. It's after discovery and all of that. If they pay in full upfront. If not, they can do a payment plan of 4 payments, but there's a 10% processing fee to that. So payment plan's fine, but I do have a little bit of an upcharge for that. And most people end up paying in full. And then there have been some clients where we do little different bespoke packages that you talked about, Gabe, and kind of design it. But I only go to that with certain people where I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to serve you. Like, this is so impactful. Let's design it together, because it's really about supporting them. And it feels great, but I do that because the other ones are.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like, you really have to feel that love and that excitement up front to do it. Like,
Yes.
I just did it recently, and I pegged it to something in that person's life where they were like, oh, well, I'm committed to like not drinking for the next 3 months. And I realized I'm saving like $400 a month on, not drinking at the bar. And I was like, great. Then like, I'm going to keep you committed to that by having you reinvested in yourself. And for our first 4 months together, you just pay me that 400 that you're not spending on booze. And then after that, we can go up to the normal rate, because I want to feel that like I believe in you and I want to demonstrate that value. And it would be petty to me to like just say, no, never mind. But like, they were just like, they cried on that call because like they felt so met by me, and they were so excited to send me that money at the end of the conversation, because it was me kind of showing up front, like, I want this for you as bad as you want it, maybe more so. And I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is and invest in you up front.
Yeah.
Right. So being able to have that flexibility in pricing is really powerful when it needs to be. But like Lindsay said, not offering it out of the gate, and not offering those shorter packages out of the gate too. I think you have a more sustainable business if you have longer engagements, and you also get people who are committed to working on powerful stuff. If somebody thinks they're going to change their relationship with forgiveness or totally restructure their time management in 8-10 weeks, have them genuinely question that. Like, are you sure you can do that? Are you biting off more than you can chew? How do you want this to feel? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want this to be like all up front, like those weekly things, like you said, Lindsay? Do you want to just jump right into it? I've met coaches who actually do that. They'll say, for the first 2 or 3 months, we meet every week to establish a cadence of accountability. Then we taper and we go to every 2 weeks towards the end.
I've done that too, of going from like every 2 weeks to monthly then with certain clients that I've been around with, and that works beautifully. And then the time will come when they want to pick it back up again. So it's like this phase. But to talk a little bit around, so Susan, I think I answered your question. Charging 6 months, I do, yeah, ideally, but not always. And then for work, I'll share my corporate pricing a little bit, because I think this was an interesting discussion between you and I, Gabe. I've noticed in talking to other people, different industries pay very different amounts. So being in the advertising industry as some of my first corporate opportunities. I had some great references and connections within the industry to get a sense of pricing. And I even went down a little bit, and I ended up with the agency I worked with, I charged $6,000 for instructional design. So designing, they asked me to build these trainings. So I was building it for them. And so I charged $6K to do that. And then I charged $6K to facilitate a 2-hour session. So for one training, I got $12,000. And then for another one, I built it for $6K, but then it was a 2-session one. It was 2 parts. So then I got $12,000 just for facilitating and $6K to build it. So it turned into a really big contract. And that even was like less than other charge, but then I talked to other people in the industry, and they like hired someone, I think at $5K even to do a whole day on-site summit or something. So, but I felt out my contact at that agency to say, in general, what's your budget for this? What do you charge others? And then I came in a little bit under, because she knew I was new, first time doing this. And then I was terrified to send over that proposal. Didn't even question it, signed it right away. And then with the law firm, I asked what their budget was, and then I stayed as close to my rates I could and still felt like I was charging something that I felt great for, and did 2 workshops for them for $20K. So that was great. And then, and then the other part of that is the coaching, the executive coaching contracts. So I talked to a lot of other coaches to find out, what do corporations pay for you to coach their executives? You hear anything from like $40K for 6 months to like $5K. So I had no idea. And I went in not asking budget, talking to my contact at this agency, and said, all right, for 6 months for an executive, it's $15K, thinking it was like middle of the road stretch. Great. Can't wait for that. And it was just, I ate a piece of humble pie, because they were like, well, Lindsay, I'm sure you're worth that, but actually our budget's $5 to $7K. I was like, she's like, I'm happy to give you the $7K, but that's what our budget is. And that's still more than I'm making on the one. So it's great. So you just don't know until you kind of find out. But it was great. Best resources, asking people and not being afraid to inquire, and then charge what they will pay.
And be okay with being a little afraid to send that proposal. Like you said,
Yeah.
I was super scared to offer that, because my facilitation contract was 30 grand the first time I sent it over. And I was just like, like, all right, click, like, yeah, exactly. They're just like, okay, cool. And like I said, I think I undercharged, like I'm only at 2K for those, for that. It's a 16 workshop series, but I like that it's occurring over a longer period of time. We're getting great feedback from the people in the organization. It was rated the highest rated training in their entire learning management system, with a team of 5,000 people. They probably offer 30, 40 programs a year. The workshop session I did was rated number 1. So we can come back to that, like, and be like, cool, like, let's look at the data of what worked well. Let's increase the price. Let's increase the scope. Let's do a case study on it, so I can share this with other organizations, right? Like, how are you building depth into that relationship? And I didn't need to charge for design, because for me, those workshops were plug and play. And so Lindsay mentioned a really important, like, side note here, that if you do need to do something bespoke, if you do need to kind of create something that like really matches a client and is a specific ask, charge for the development cost. Make it a ratio of the facilitation cost. But I had to do that for an onsite. I did a team development, like purpose alignment, vision setting, mission statement, weekend long thing. I charged like 40% of the total contract value was the development time, because I had to spend a lot of hours thinking through those workshops, doing the timing, finding the resources, getting the facilitation plan in place. So when I showed up, I had already done like 15 or 20 hours of work for that client before I ever even showed up to facilitate it. So people expect to pay for that, right? They're going to understand that's valuable. Or you can make it easy on yourself and save money for the client, just being like, I actually have some stuff that works well that I've done before. You could just do these off the shelf, ready to go, plug and play stuff that I know how to facilitate. If you have a few things that you've done before that you think are going to work, and you can just run in that without the development cost and the anxiety of doing something new, because you're always going to be nervous the first time you try it.
Yeah.
And so there's benefits to each, but you need to make sure that you're accounting for the energy that goes into the process, whether they actually like see that with you in the front of the room, or it's you behind the scenes working on delivering that value. It's still accounted for as a line item.
Yeah, it's something about that too, is I learned is think about your audience and who you're sending your proposal to. So my first time I was working with HR. They deal with tons of workshops. They're the one who hire all these facilitators. She like very transparent and knows everything. So I broke out instructional design versus like facilitating it, and we had that type of visibility into it. Versus when I was working with the law firm, I wasn't working with like HR people who do and are build these and manage these. It was like it's working with lawyers and their managers who are like approving this cost. So when I was describing it that way, she's like, that's confusing. They don't know. Give like a one cost. And she's like, and if you're this in-person one, I understand it needs to be more expensive than the virtual one because you have to travel. So to include all your travel in there, don't see it as extra, like upcharge to cover your cost for that versus separate. It's like, oh. And then she even mentioned, so I changed the way I proposed and structured that. It was like one cost and included everything.
Yep.
And then when they were talking to me about coming back, I haven't created that proposal. It's not for sure yet. But then she was like, obviously we'd pay you if you did this again, a couple $1,000s for you to give the training again. In my mind, I was like, it's going to be more than that, because yes, I've already built it, but 2K doesn't feel right to me. And I do have to restructure it. I have to change it for my audience. I'm going to be optimizing the training as well as like for my travel and whatever. So it's not going to be the 11K for the first one, but 2K isn't there either. So there's going to be a little bit of renegotiation there. And so one last build on it is what I'm doing for the agency. They now are looking to turn that into certification program so that like you have, Gabe, reoccurring. So similarly, it's built, but I'm going to optimize. So like the pricing will change if it's a larger amount of, negotiating like a larger amount of actual sessions with some optimization in there, but the bulk is there. So maybe it'll be like a 6K or 5K each, bring my facilitation down a little bit since they're buying more, but not, so it's a lot of things to think about that I'm still playing with, but
Yeah.
It's thinking of your audience, of who you're sending it to and what they need to see, and not overselling when you don't have to.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something important about the clean single line item, right? It's like I can give you a project breakdown, but like here's just what it will cost, right? And understanding how your organizational buyer thinks about that in a pricing psychology thing. It's the same with the one-on-one. It's like, are they going to be more comfortable just like paying for it up front? Are they going to feel more excited to do month to month? I actually do more month to month than upfront. Lindsay sounds like you do the opposite. And I say to people, I want both of us to feel accountable to your value in this process. I don't want you to feel like I took all the money and like, now I'm not attached to those outcomes. I want to earn your business every month we work together so we can do monthly pricing, because that's keeping us both accountable to creating impact and value for you. If you want to save a little money and you feel really stoked about doing this, here's an option to save $400. You can pay that $5,000, right? But I kind of structure it to say like, I'm with you in this and I want us to both feel like we're holding it together. And so Michelle, that's speaking a little to your question about the one-on-one private practice. We did talk about that earlier. So I see your question in the chat. And I'm just noticing our time and I want to make sure we have room for a general Q&A. So Lindsay, if you're okay with it, if there's anything else you want to add before we transition, I think I'd be happy to have folks just open up to a broader dialogue.
Totally. No, let's go for it.
Awesome. Yeah. So does anybody have questions or things they want to bring to the group?
Or topics? Yeah. Does anyone have any perspectives or experience that's different than what we shared? Like a different pricing structure that's worked really well for them? Or a different, like one of their legs of your stool that serves your business really well?
One thing that you didn't talk about is like, I will often sell a package to a client that's like 3 or 6 months long. And then a lot of my clients will stay on with me for like an indefinite period of time after.
Yeah.
So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I have a lot of renewals, but I do kind of like move people out of the practice. I don't have anybody who's been with me for more than a year or a year and a half. Some of those clients I've noticed like they're creating sort of a structure of dependency on our work, and I try to move them to a place of like, ideally, it's great doing this business because you feel equally good when you get fired and when you get rehired. It's really interesting. But I do want people to feel like they're getting what they came for and they're cycling out of it. That's what feels good to me organically. And so my renewals are like, for the first year, yeah, typically the 6 months, I'd say like 60 or 70% of them will renew. But beyond a year, I like try to bring folks to a conclusion with what we're doing together and say they can always rehire me. because I do offer ad hoc only for existing clients who've completed a cycle with me. I'll allow them the option to do an ad hoc call for like 200 or something like that. I'm flexible pricing, but just like you can do a drop-in call because we have the context we need. And a handful of my longest standing clients will do that.
I'm the same way and only offering monthly. I like to go to monthly. What I've noticed with a lot of my clients is like in the initial 6 months or initial contract, we'll get them to where they want to go, whether it's like career transitioning or, they feel great. Then sometimes they transition to something new. And then actually the objectives of coaching, we want to continue on, but now it's a new phase of more like maintenance or growing into the new position. Or often I talk about like the first session, we're building a lot of we're building up your toolbox of tools of understanding yourself. And then often if we continue, whether monthly or continuing at the same rate, now we're just like building up your muscle memory and how to use these tools, to be building independence in them so that you can, be really self-sufficient and not, we're not working together constantly. And then also another build on renewals is, what's worked well for me is if we feel like we're at a time where we're closing things out, and that feels great, but they're like, but I've loved this, it's so amazing. But like, right now I feel great. And like, good, you are great. Like, why don't we schedule a call for 6 months and do a check-in? So it's continuing to build and nurture the relationship. And it's never pressuring at that point. It's just like, I'll ask, like, is there something that coaching would serve you right now? And we'll talk about it. But it's like, okay, well, no, this is great. Let's talk again in 3 months and 6 months.
6 months. Yeah.
Maintaining the relationship versus trying to like sell them a new package or renewal. But I also have some clients that stay on I have had clients for a couple of years, actually. Gabe a little differently, but it's been a very evolving relationship.
That's the key. And I want to speak to one more quick point on that before we move to some of the other great questions that I'm sure are out here, is that if you keep clients around for a long time and they stay in the practice, you end up having lagging clients that like the energy you put out as a coach is who you attract as a client. And so if you had clients for 2 years, you're probably a way more powerful coach than you were 2 years ago. And you're coaching the people in your practice at a different level than where you are now. And I found that was true for me. I went through almost a 100% cycling out of my clients in like June, and I was terrified. I went from coaching 12 people to almost 0, but it was like, it sort of just like cleared the land. And then like new people came in who were way more intense and interesting for me to coach because they were meeting me at my new level as a coach. And so if you have your practice filled up with people that have been there for a while, you might be actually like sandbagging your growth as a coach because those clients are expecting one process from you and you're not creating room for that bigger thing. So I saw Mars' hand first, and then we'll go to Michelle.
Quick question about referrals. So with one-on-one clients, the testimonials I've gotten have been fantastic. There's been change with clients. There's been transformation. And again, I'm not afraid to ask. Again, someone that would benefit from a conversation with me. But what I'm noticing is referrals have not really been trickling in the same way the testimonials have been from clients. So I'm wondering if you can speak to how you maybe nurture that with your clients or,
Gabe, if you have a perspective here, jump in first. I would, because I've had like, it's interesting with referrals for me. Like I've had a couple people that have brought me a ton of referrals, and then that's kind of trickled and ended. And then I've noticed with referrals that it comes in the same almost like wave or pattern of business of start of the year. I'll get a lot of people coming in from referrals. Then it goes kind of dead. And then I get more and then like this time of year, like there's like certain peaks where I get it. But let me reflect on this a little bit more in terms of strategy of increasing referral rate.
September's the new January. September's the new January.
Completely. Right? Yes.
No, I agree. There's a cycle to it. But I think that what helps me is really nurturing the relationship and reminding them of the value they got from it. So I'll still send formal clients like articles I read or a podcast, be like, this totally reminded me of something we discussed, right? Like continue to add value to their lives, continue to create impact, thank them for the relationship. Be like, I was reflecting on our coaching process the other day, and I used an example of a metaphor we came up with a new client. You know what I mean? Like, let them know that like you were impacted by that process too. And if anybody does thank you or does send you a referral, like thank them a bunch of times and tell them the impact that referral created. So like the woman who plugged me into that large organization that did the $30,000 referral thing, I sent her screenshots of the reviews all the time, be like, you created this for this team. You were
Yes.
part of this, right? And they get to feel amazing about helping facilitate that transformation. And then they're much more likely to think of me the next time a conversation comes up. So staying top of mind is important by just nurturing that relationship and saying like, thank you. Here's something I think you'll love, right? I write handwritten cards to everybody at the end of the year with like a prompt for the new year, some reflection questions, just keeping that relationship vibrant, I think is the best thing, right? And not coming in with the ask all the time, but a reminder, and sometimes with an ask, say like, hey, you know what? I did it in like June when I had that like total turnover. I went to a few of my best clients. I said, hey, I have a lot of space in my practice right now. I'd love to fill it with people who are super aligned with me. I know you get me, and I know you and I did great work together. Do you know any of, I'm looking for 5 more of you, right? Do you know them? Help me find those people. Because like the people who know you best are also your best advocates. So it's okay every once in a while to make that ask.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I'm a big, like, gifts is one of my love languages. So I do that a lot. And folks have given me a lot of referrals, like on anniversaries that are important. Like my one client, when they started their business, on like the 1 year of starting their business, they brought me a lot of referrals. I just sent them a bunch of flowers and congratulated them. And so I do little things like that. Like I had a new client that was a referral from someone else, and it wasn't 100% yes at the moment, but we scheduled time to talk in 6 months. And so there was a book that came that I realized reminded me of what they're trying to work towards. So I just sent them today a book with a card and just said, thinking that this is something that would benefit you and where you in your season that you're in. So I do a lot of that, like like we said, investing time and even sometimes money and effort into the people that really light me up, knowing that they're probably feeling it too, and then they might bring me more of the right people.
Yep. I mailed somebody a book last week and they just sent me a message today that they opened it up and cried. And it was like, that's the impact that I want to have, And Michelle, I definitely want to get to you in the time we have left. So why don't you bring your question as well?
Hi. So I hear from the parts that I've been here for that so many coaches offer packages. And what I'm struggling with is, it's funny because I was thinking about it this morning. I was thinking how, we consider our clients to be naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. Yet, when you make a package, I feel as though that's almost disabling to that. In other words, I work more a la carte, like however you pay by the session. I don't lock people in for a certain amount of time because I feel as though if they need another session, they're going to say they need another session. If they don't need another session, so please, like, if you could explain to me what you feel is the benefit of the packages, not only for your financial bottom line, but for the client.
I
That's all
love
my
that question. And I'd be happy to speak to that, Lindsay, if you're okay with me leading on that.
Please, I'll build.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times it's about commitment to something larger than the client can hold for themselves, right? So they're naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And it's also the coach's role to hold the client greater than they can hold themselves, right? I think of it as holding a door open for somebody while they're walking towards the building. And they can take as long as they need to get there. It's your job to hold that door of possibility open for them. And they might decide while they're walking there, it's like, actually, you know what? It's really nice out here. I'm going to stay outside the building. I'm really scared by this threshold or challenge. I'm going to decide that I'd rather go to McDonald's than walk into the gym, right? And so you've created a structure and a lane for them to stay committed to something that they're going to be in longer than they might have done it on their own. And so I think offering that like kind of escape hatch all the time doesn't serve their greater nature in the long run, because they have the option versus like they have the option in the month-to-month packaging, right? They could still say, you know what, next month I'm not going to renew, but it isn't a decision they need to make every single time. And you have to redecide to commit to something. It's the same with an investment strategy. If you set up an auto invest or an auto donation to a charity, I don't have to decide to support Planned Parenthood or against malaria. I've made a commitment to represent my values in that context. $50 a month automatically out of my checking account. If I had to redecide every month to do that, I might be like, you know what, this month I need that $50. Like, I'm not going to do it. So if you create that structure like of like a bailout option, I think it underserves that stretching into creating like a greater possibility for them in the long run. And so I do think that that container has real value and has real impact, because you can, you're basically taking the decision out of it. The decision is the hard part. Once they say yes, you want to keep that container as tight as you can. And so that's where I've really, sorry?
It helps them to show up a little bit more without having to
Exactly.
think about showing up.
Exactly. They don't have to make the decision to show up. They've already committed.
Yeah, and a lot of the time. Oh, sorry, Michelle. Please finish what you're going to say.
I just said I appreciate that. Keep going.
No, great. I mean, this is such a powerful question, and Gabe, you answered it exactly where my mindset was too around that. And also, when depending on the client and what we're looking to do, I talk them through a lot of the tools that we'll build together, especially for new clients, really only. So it's talking a lot about bringing them into a program, and so there is a certain amount of time I say that's needed in order for the program in terms of what we're going to build. Whether that's, I'm very values driven coach, was huge for me. So like establishing and defining values, like a lot of that work I don't do in my discovery, we do it together because I want to be teaching them how we're building these tools together, and then how to be leveraging the tools in terms of what's important for them. So that's leader within, if that's values, is that saboteur combating, whatever that might look like. So I also am walking them through like why the amount of time committed is needed in order to accomplish some of that together. And so I think that also too, in terms of committing to that amount of time, helps them understand what we're going to be working towards together and giving time for that to actually happen and blossom.
Yeah, and Susan,
I appreciate that idea that, hi, it's not going to be this one session quick fix thing. Hi, you're in and we have a lot of work to do. And are you in for the job?
yeah,
I like that. Appreciate it.
I like you mentioned quick fix too, right? Because I think you create the impression that that's what's on offer if you're doing like, oh, let's just do a la carte, let's just come in and fix it. You might be bringing fix it energy as a coach and trying to consult too, instead of like having them commit to something bigger and more expansive. And Susan mentioned before you got on the call, you basically, she said something like sell them what they want and give them what they need. And so they might not actually know that they need this bigger thing. They can't see that from their side of their challenge, right? So you're creating that space based on your experience for them. And I know we're almost at our time here. I really love that question, Michelle. Thanks for bringing it.
Thank you.
Want to make space for maybe one more question, and also offer folks the opportunity to stay in touch too, because if there were questions you didn't get answered and you want to talk to me and drop in one-on-one, there's a link in the chat to book a deeper conversation. I'm happy to continue this conversation and be of service to you guys if I can be. And Lindsay, I don't know if you have
Yep, I'm gonna share a link as well. Love to talk more about your business, clients, anything. Happy to help.
But yeah, we're right at time. I'm happy to hang for another minute or two for folks who had one more burning question, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I can stay too.
I just wanted to say thank you, like for people who get paid thousands of dollars an hour to do an hour and a half workshop with us for free is so generous. So thank you both.
Well, this has been just to sit in a room with other coaches like this, like I always feel so much more fulfilled and empowered, and just like my mind is blown just hearing from other folks in the industry. And so it's an honor, really. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I feel grateful that everybody was actually willing to show up for this. You know, I was like, all right, cool. We had a discussion on the internet and folks are willing to, you know, show up at any time zone from around the world and be part of this conversation. We're honored by your presence. So
completely. Yeah, any final thoughts or questions? Amazing.
Great. Well, we'll end it there. Thanks everybody for being here.
Is this going to be easily accessible, the recording?
Yeah, I recorded the session. Give me a while to figure out what to do with it, but we'll post it out to you guys whenever we get it ready to go. Thanks, Michael. Thanks everybody.
Thank you all so much for your time.
Go out there and change the world. Go do it. The world needs you.